And welcome to Let Them Talk. I'm Paul DiRienzo. We have a great show in store for you tonight. And my guest is Doug Greene. Welcome back, Doug. Your fourth or fifth time. I've lost track of how many times you've been on this show.
I've lost track too. It's got to be at least, 4 or 5 sounds about right.
Right. And Doug represents the Students for Sensible Drug Policy, New York NORML.
Empire State NORML.
Empire State NORML.
Empire State NORML.
All right.
Yep.
And you're not members of the Emperor Club.
No.
We all know what that was. Some of us do. So, Empire State NORML. What is normal? You look very normal, actually. I wouldn't say you don't look normal, but what does normal mean? What is normal?
NORML is the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws.
National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. I get it. NORML.
Yes, that's right.
I see. It's an acronym for an organization that's been fighting for many decades on behalf of...
Since 1970, it is the voice of the marijuana consumer.
And what does NORML do? Where is NORML headquartered? What does it do?
Well, Empire State NORML is the New York State chapter of the National NORML. National NORML is headquartered in D.C., and Empire State NORML works on advocating to change the laws and change attitudes around marijuana.
How does it do that? How does NORML operate?
We go to public events. We work on legislation. Work on advocacy for legislation that's been introduced. And try and get people to contact their legislators and other elected officials to support it, and work with other organizations, other reform organizations, to try and change policy in New York City and New York State.
So your focus here in New York State and New York City, are you working on any national programs? Does NORML ever work on like unified national programs?
NORML does do lobbying in Washington, D.C., but right now one of the interesting things about this year is that there are a lot of positive bills out there. There are bills to reschedule marijuana from its current classification as Schedule 1, which means it has no medical use, a high potential for abuse, and no recognized safety even under medical use.
Right.
Bills to completely remove it from the Controlled Substances Act. Bills to allow states to freely legalize marijuana for recreational purposes or medical purposes. So there are a lot of bills out there. There are probably at least 6 or 7. The only thing that really seems to have traction right now is our bills for industrial hemp.
Industrial hemp has traction. Why? Financial?
Because that's something that it's not psychoactive. It doesn't get you high. There's support from agricultural states like Kentucky. This is something where Rand Paul championed it and got Mitch McConnell, the senior senator from Kentucky, who's the Republican leader in the Senate, to actually champion it.
Interesting. So So the Republican Party are championing industrial hemp. What is industrial hemp? And why is that illegal? Why would industrial hemp be even illegal at all if it isn't used recreationally?
Because the United States is one of the
tell
only...
us what it is first.
Industrial hemp is a variety of cannabis that has very, very low percentages of THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, which is the active ingredient that is associated with the high of marijuana.
Why grow it?
Why grow it? Because it, over the 4th of July, I was actually privileged to be down on the 4th of July for this. There was a representative by the name of Jared Paulus from Colorado who actually got the flag that was flying on the 4th of July to be one of the old flags made out of hemp. And this is something where
How many stars did it have? Do you know?
I think it might have been 13.
13 stars, and it was made out of hemp. So the original flag of the United States, of the 13 states that originated, that made the revolution against England, was made of hemp.
I can't say for sure that it was the very first one, but definitely one of the first flags were made out of hemp. And this is something that you can use for food. Peasants in the medieval era used to survive on hemp seed gruel. Perhaps not the
hemp seed gruel.
Hemp seed gruel.
That gives Dickens a new meaning.
Yes, it would keep you alive. It's definitely nothing like the organic Manitoba Harvest, hemp hearts that I get and mix into my oatmeal in the morning.
What are Manitoba Harvest hemp hearts?
They're the inner core of the hemp seed, the softest the softest part. Manitoba Harvest is a very big hemp company in Canada.
Why do you eat hemp hearts from Manitoba?
Well, I mean, they can legally grow it in Canada. They can legally grow.
But why do you eat it?
Because it's very healthy. It has very good profiles of omega-3s and omega-6s.
Okay, so
fiber.
Okay.
I mean, and
it helps too. You're a vegan, right?
Mostly vegan. Totally vegetarian, mostly vegan.
Okay, and so you find this is part of a vegetarian vegan diet to be an important part of it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's totally vegan. There's no animal products.
No, there are no animal products in the hemp. So anyway, most countries...
So it's food, and it's also industrial purposes.
Right, food, fiber. They used to make rope and sails out of it.
What can we make today out of it?
You can make houses. You can make houses out of hemp.
And the Native Americans do that, I think, in the reservation in South Dakota.
I think that there was a Sioux tribe in South Dakota that actually had tried to grow hemp, but actually got raided.
You're not allowed to grow hemp that doesn't make you high in the United States without being raided.
Right, because the Controlled Substances Act defines marijuana as any growing part of the plant. It does not distinguish by THC level.
So any part of that plant, the plant is what it is self-banned.
Right.
Itself is banned.
Yes. The growing plant is banned, no matter how high or low the THC content is.
So how can you have Manitoba seed gruel?
Because the plant, even though the plant itself is illegal, the products from from the plant are legal.
Wow, this is confusing.
Yes,
this is a very confusing set of laws.
It is very confusing. So finally, we have some traction on this. There's the Farm Bill is still in committee, but there's a provision in the Farm Bill to allow universities to do research on industrial hemp.
So the Democrats and the Republicans, the Farm Bill is a good example of how that used to be something that was done in a bipartisan manner, and now there's even division on that over food stamps, over helping farmers, and now it's even holding back industrial hemp, something that could add to the economy.
Right, and I mean, let me emphasize, it's a very limited provision. Just
right.
This
is where dysfunction in Washington is affecting whole new areas of industry that both parties seem to have support.
Right, that's true.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
So another example of that in the hemp marijuana world that we might not have heard of. You know
right,
what I mean?
But that's one of the only things that there is traction around on the national level. I mean, most of these bills, I mean, at least they're good bills being introduced rather than bad bills.
Marijuana as a medical marijuana, for legalization, all these kind of things.
Right, for changing the tax code, because as it is, if you sell a Schedule 1 or Schedule 2 substance, you cannot deduct normal business expenses.
So you can't run it as real business on a federal tax, even though it's legal. Now let's run it down. How many states are legal? Is marijuana legal?
Is marijuana legal for what purpose? Let's break it down.
To get high. To get
for
high.
recreational.
To get high. We used to call it to get high when I was a kid.
As we like to call it, adult non-medical use.
All right.
So there are two states, Colorado State and Washington State. And
right.
Colorado, the licenses are being decided right now. As of January 1st, there will be places to go where you can buy, if you're a Colorado resident, up to an ounce, and if you're out of state, up to a quarter an ounce. You can still possess an ounce, but you can only buy a quarter of an ounce in one transaction.
If you're out of state.
So if you're out of state, that's right.
Interesting. They're trying to hold back on the marijuana tourism in Colorado?
They're worried about diversion. They're worried about diversion.
Okay.
So, in both Washington State and Colorado, it is legal for an adult to possess up to an ounce. Washington State is a little bit further behind. We expect probably...
It's legal. I'm told it's legal there.
It is.
I was out there, and the people who live there say it's legal. And in fact, I had on this show 2 weeks ago, Tom Bailey, who's a downwinder from Hanford, who says his health was impacted but from cancer and other diseases from the radiation from the plutonium plant in Hanford, Washington.
Right.
He is now, Tom Bailey, who's a farmer, sort of a conservative guy, right, except for this Hanford experience, he's now growing medical marijuana on his farm in order to treat people with cancer that they contracted from radiation releases at the Hanford nuclear plant.
That's amazing.
And he was talking about this on this show, probably the first time anybody heard it anywhere, just 2 weeks ago.
Right.
So this is amazing. Marijuana seems to be changing. It seems that we've had this discussion now 5-6 times. What's going on? Marijuana seems to have come a long way in just a short period of time since the last time I had you on. A lot of changes.
Right. I mean, even
we were predicting these changes, but they really haven't.
I mean,
you were predicting them.
I don't think anyone was predicting that they were going to happen so fast.
Yeah.
I mean, even in the course of since last November, when Amendment 64 in Colorado and Initiative 502 passed in Washington State, the polls have gone up by about 10 points. The latest Gallup poll that came out last month was 58% of adults being in favor of legal
just
marijuana
legalizing it straight out. What's the federal government doing? They were going after people. They said from the Clinton administration, Mr. I didn't inhale, through the Obama Bush administration, reformed drunk, to the Obama admitted cocaine marijuana dealer. I mean, we've gone through all of these, but what's happening now?
What's happening now is that in the end of August, the Justice Department put out a memo, basically saying that they, at this point, they are not going to intervene to try and stop this, this noble experiment, and gave a list of criteria that they were going to look for. They, of course, as they have in the past with memos about medical marijuana, reserve the right to prosecute at any point, but they were going to be looking for, diversion across state lines, sales to children, violence, links to organized crime.
For simple recreational use by adults consenting, they're stepping back.
They're stepping back for the moment and seeing how Washington State and Colorado managed to handle the situation and what happens.
Well, I was in Washington just recently, and there was actually a home invasion robbery of people who had a grow operation, a legal grow operation, and the police came looking for the robbers and provided information to growers in that community as to how to prevent or to avoid robbery situations.
Right. I mean, the police department...
They're being helpful.
Yeah, they're being helpful. Like the Seattle Police Department actually won an award from the Drug Policy Alliance last month for their work in terms of publicizing the law. There's a big event that happens every year called Hemp Fest, which is over 3 days, about 350,000 people, and they were actually giving out bags of Doritos.
The cops were.
The cops were. They only had about 1,000 of them, so definitely it was a limited edition item, but it referred people to, they had made a video called What Now?
What Now?
What Now? Yeah, What Now? Sort of, talking about, it's legal, it's legal, but
what are the rules?
What are the rules? Right.
I know they had Big Lebowski, and the police station's been giving out this poster. The police there, it's the Big Lebowski, and then underneath it said, "The dude abides." And it just has the different rules that they have for where you can smoke, when you can smoke, and things like that. Right?
I haven't even seen that poster.
Yeah, I haven't seen it either. I just heard about it. It says the dude abides.
I have to find that.
And then they list the rule, the 10 rules. You don't do it in public. Don't do it in your home. Blah blah blah.
Right.
Yeah, and so in that way they're being helpful, right?
Yeah, they're being helpful. I mean, attitudes are changing.
It's reducing the tension already, I'm told, in police stops. Already, police stops like literally reduced the tension in half or more.
Right, because most people...
pot. It was pot. Most of the pullovers, what scared people was pot.
Right. So, this is definitely a way to reduce the everyday tension of
citizen and police. Yeah, absolutely.
And it would help a lot here.
Right, now let's talk about New York. Now all these California, the West Coast seems way light years ahead on this issue. What's happening on the East Coast?
Well, oddly enough, on the East Coast, I mean, if you look at the Northeast, every state in the Northeast, except for New York, is now a medical marijuana state.
Except for New York.
Except for New York.
Our former governor was Client 9, and we still don't have medical marijuana?
We still don't have medical marijuana.
It's like smacks of, I mention that because it smacks of extreme hypocrisy, considering how widespread marijuana smoking is in every single level of society in New York State and city.
Right.
I mean, but is there a police department in New York City in New York State that does not have some cops smoking pot right now?
I can't answer that question. I believe I would think probably some upstate. There might be some upstate where there's no
marijuana, where people really believe it.
Yeah, or don't have access.
Right, don't have access. It's coming from Canada.
That That's true, but it's probably not stopping in every town between here and the New York State border.
Okay.
I'm sure there are places it skips over because it's not cheap.
Okay.
So.
And there's poor parts of New York State, upstate
very,
New York,
very
where marijuana
parts.
might be too expensive,
Right.
especially that fine
And actually,
Canadian.
going back to industrial hemp,
Well, why don't
that
we-
would be very helpful upstate.
in the economy upstate,
Yeah.
right? As a great economic boost to upstate New York.
Right.
And marijuana itself, I mean, that was one of the main things that pushed this in Colorado and Washington was that Colorado, for example, is instituting a taxation policy where it's
Yep.
very high, stiff tax.
They just
a
passed
stiff
it.
tax.
They just passed it last week.
Yeah, it's not going to be that much cheaper but it's just going to be legal.
Right. No, it's going to be I believe a 25% excise tax and then a 10%. A 15% excise tax and then a 10% sales tax.
And I hear the growers and the marijuana supporters are supporting that.
There was some opposition to it, but in general, it passed. I think people were willing to, pay the price. One of the things Amendment 64 required is that the first revenue from marijuana went to schools, like $40 million for schools.
So every time somebody buys a quarter ounce or a half ounce or an ounce in Colorado, the tax, 25% of that money is going to go to funding schools in that state.
I think up to $40 million, like the first $40 million
All right.
per year.
Does that count? Does South Park count in that?
South Park counts.
I'm sorry, kidding you. That's,
there is
one of my favorite shows.
It's one of my, as you know, it's one of my favorite shows too. And actually, one of the people, one of my friends who's out in Denver with me, went through South Park at some point during their
There
trip.
really is a South Park.
There really is a South Park.
I had
Colorado.
no idea.
Yes,
I learn something new on the show every week.
Yes, there is a South Park.
We all do. All right, wow. So great. So but New York is still the one. New Jersey. They're growing in New Jersey, right?
New Jersey has one dispensary open in Montclair, and there's another one that I think is just about to open up in Egg Harbor, in the south, and then there's a third. I think, New Jersey is starting out with 6 dispensaries, and I think that.
And the world didn't end.
The world didn't end, and Chris Christie even eased up a little bit. On the regulations. So
about the schools, the unrealistic expectations that every place you bought had to be so far from a school that nobody would actually be. There wouldn't be a place you could have it except out of town or something.
I mean, a lot of that has to do with federal law.
Yeah.
The federal law is 1,000 feet from certain sensitive use spaces. Washington State even actually got into a little bit of trouble over that because they tried to modify that 1,000 feet to something that would allow more uses. The federal government said no, it really has to be literally 1,000 feet as the crow flies versus 1,000 feet from an access point.
I see. Oh my gosh! So this is more of this federal state,
right? That's
bickering and battling.
That's kind of another,
Okay.
Another
Coming
factor.
back to New York State though, because we always wind up going to these more advanced, states, these more evolved states. But let's come back to New York. Why is New York a big white hole in the map when it comes to medical marijuana? Or marijuana in general.
I'd say the biggest problem is we have a governor who is not yet convinced on this issue. And of course we have a state senate that, although is now nominally controlled by a coalition of independent Democrats and Republicans, unfortunately the independent Democrats don't seem to have made much progress in really shaping the agenda in the Senate this year.
So, and there's medical marijuana bills. New York State was actually the first state, or one of the first states, to have medical marijuana back in 1980. New York State. We actually do have a bill, don't we?
There is
the Oliveri Act.
Yeah, that is still part of the public health law. However, the way it was written was that it was based on getting marijuana from from the federal government through the farm in the University of Mississippi.
So the big thing, since California's Proposition 215 in the 90s till today, the big innovation has been to allow patients to grow their own pot and for dispensaries to dispense it.
Well, actually, not so much anymore in terms of patients growing their own pot. You have to understand, when people talk about medical marijuana, since then there have been 19 other states, and
plus California makes 20 states, right?
Right, 20 states in the District of Columbia that have medical marijuana. And what everyone says is we don't want California, because California Prop 215 was written very loosely. There was a bill that the legislature passed several years later to enact certain other laws around medical marijuana. But really, it's a total patchwork where every local government has different rules.
All over California. But California's like that. It's a big patchwork of people and communities everywhere.
Right.
I could never imagine California totally uniting around one idea of anything.
Right, but unfortunately, this has made it a lot easier for the federal government to say these people are violating federal law and state law.
I see.
And
how are they violating state law in California?
For example, by having too many plants.
Oh, I see. So people basically ignore the law there. They just do whatever they want. The law, whatever the law rules are, the actual way so many people act there, growers and suppliers, is we'll do whatever the market demands.
I mean, some people do, some people do, and some people don't. But unfortunately, there have been people who have tried to stay within the boundaries of the law, like Ed Rosenthal. Ed Rosenthal was deputized by the city of Oakland to grow marijuana, and he was still prosecuted.
Right, that's true. He was deputized, and he was prosecuted. What happened with his prosecution? Ed Rosenthal, ask Ed from High Times fame, one of the leading spokespeople for growing your own marijuana, lives in California, originally from New York, comes here occasionally. Why was he arrested, and what happened to him in California?
I don't know all the details of why he was arrested, but I know basically he got sentenced to time served, which I think was like a day in jail. And then yet I think he even went and appealed that. He just wanted to vacate the sentence altogether, and I believe he lost.
And they're vacating it.
Yeah.
Well, but they're why would they, where in California where they had Proposition 215, medical marijuana, the first state to legalize medical marijuana, are there still people being arrested in California?
There are U.S. attorneys who are not, who are not in favor of medical marijuana.
And they're prosecuting at the federal level.
And they're prosecuting at the federal level. Harborside Health Center, one of the biggest, probably the biggest dispensary in the country, in San Jose and Oakland. They are trying to prosecute their landlord.
Now, I thought, though, Obama had said that the Attorney General was supposed to step back on this.
They had issued several memos over the years saying that they were going to not interfere with people who were in compliance with state law and federal law, and yet Obama has managed to raid more dispensaries than under George W. Bush. Is
California came pretty close to legalizing it there by referendum last time?
Yeah, they did. I was actually out in Oakland for the week before the vote on Prop 19 in 2010, and got 47.5% of the vote. And there are at least 2 initiatives right now that are getting signatures for the 2014 ballot. Kind of the big funders generally are looking for at 2016 rather than 2014, but as Ethan Nadelman noted in Denver,
Nadelman is the
head of Drug Policy Alliance.
Yeah,
one of the most formidable.
Ethan Nadelman, one of the main spokespeople for legalizing all the drugs, really, or medicalizing them, or harm reduction.
Yes, for as they would say, drug policies founded in compassion, health, science, and human rights. And he had said the climate is changing so fast that funders are starting to think that maybe these are things that could happen in 2014. But of course, putting things on the ballot is very expensive, very time-consuming. You have to finalize the language. You have to circulate the petitions. So really, kind of that window is sort of coming to a close for next year.
I see.
Yes.
So this is still it's still in the people getting their ducks in a row. It sounds like.
Yeah.
For a major conflict on this, or a major election conflict on this.
Yeah,
or campaign or whatever.
Yes, for 2016, but of course there are a lot of states that don't have the initiative and referendum process.
Are there any other states that are close to legalizing?
It looks like there's probably going to be something on the ballot in Alaska next year.
How does Sarah Palin stand on that?
It's not clear. I do remember she made some comments over the past few years basically saying we have more important things to worry about.
It's sort of a wedge issue of sorts, marijuana, right? It's changing. It's something that's uniting Republicans and Democrats.
Yeah, I mean, it's a broad coalition. I mean, still you look and mostly Republicans are opposed to it, but independents and Democrats are very overwhelmingly in favor of it. And it's an issue that cuts across ideologies and party lines.
So what's going to happen in New York? I mean, let's come back to New York. I know we always wander away from New York. Last couple of minutes, what's the future of the current situation in New York?
So in New York, as far as medical marijuana goes, there are bills in the legislature. The Assembly has passed medical marijuana 4 times, most recently this spring. And there are bills, Assembly Bill 6357A and Senate Bill 4406A, and people should.
Who are supporting these bills?
Who are supporting these bills are primarily Democrats. Unfortunately, there are no real Republican sponsors. The lead sponsor in the Senate, with Senator Dianne Savino from Brooklyn and Staten Island. She has claimed that the votes are there if it would get to the floor, but so far in the Senate, it hasn't even gotten out of the Health Committee, which is the first committee that has jurisdiction over the medical marijuana bill.
I see, so they can't get it out of that committee.
Can't get it out of the committee, no. Unfortunately, Ken Panin, who is the Republican from Garden City, who's chair of the Health Committee, has actually hung up on a patient.
Who just refuses to even talk to anybody about it.
Right.
So New York is really sort of competing to be in last place.
Probably not last place, but it's going to take a lot of pressure on Governor Cuomo and the Republicans in the state Senate to get this through.
10 seconds. What about De Blasio?
I think
the new mayor.
I think De Blasio is going to be great. His one of his top supporters, Melissa Mark Viverito, looks like she might be the next Speaker of the City Council. She's been very outspoken on the issue of decriminalization, of stopping arrests for marijuana in public view, which is a whole nother issue we didn't even get into.
Stop and frisk.
Right. Those issues are closely tied together. So I expect to see some very good things out of de Blasio administration, and have been doing a lot of thinking about.
Thank you, Doug Greene, for joining us on Let Them Talk.
Thank you, Paul.
Have you on again to talk more about this.
I look